Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into two, well, really quite different topics.
That's right.
First, there's this annual event in Jerusalem involving a flame, a documented thing.
Yes, a recurring phenomenon. And then we'll pivot.
To a very different take on a future return, a major religious figure.
Exactly. We've got some compelling details on both. The Jerusalem fire and then this specific prophecy interpretation. It's really a look into faith, history,
Right.
how people understand these big claims.
It is fascinating stuff and maybe, a bit challenging for some perspectives.
Could be.
Our goal here isn't really to push one view. It's more about unpacking it all, looking at the history, the detail.
And letting you consider what it might mean.
Right. So let's jump in. This annual event, first, the Holy Fire in Jerusalem.
Okay. So this happens every year, Holy Saturday. That's the day before Easter, Orthodox calendar.
At the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Correct. The place revered as, well, the site of Jesus' burial and resurrection.
And the core belief.
Is that a flame just appears miraculously from inside the tomb structure itself.
The ceremony sounds pretty unique. The Greek Orthodox patriarch goes into the sealed tomb alone.
Alone, yes. And crucially, he reportedly has nothing on him to start a fire.
No lighter, no matches.
Nothing visible, just unlit candles and prayers. That's the tradition.
So he goes in, prays, and then what?
And then, according to the accounts, the flame manifests. He comes out, his candles are lit.
Then it spreads from there.
Very quickly. People in the church have their own candles, eager to light them from that first flame. It's quite a sight, apparently.
But the descriptions go further, don't they, about the fire itself?
They do. Eyewitnesses talk about some really unusual properties, especially right at the beginning.
Like what?
Well, sometimes a blue mist is described.
Yeah.
Or a flame that seems to sort of hover over the stone slab. That's the description. And maybe the strangest part, it's often said to be cool at first.
Cool. A flame.
Cool to the touch, yes. Reportedly doesn't burn skin or hair or cloth, for a short time anyway.
How long? Is there a specific claim?
Some accounts mention around 33 minutes. That number comes up.
33 minutes. Okay, that's very specific.
It is. And there's even a claim, though I haven't seen the primary data myself, that a physicist once measured the temperature right at the start and found it surprisingly low, much cooler than you'd expect from a normal flame. Adds another layer, doesn't it?
It definitely does.
Yeah.
Now, context. The church itself is ancient.
Oh, yes. Built back in the 4th century, Emperor Constantine.
But the fire miracle.
Yeah.
When do the detailed accounts of that actually start showing up?
Ah, that's where it gets interesting. The really detailed descriptions we have, like the one from the monk Bernard, that's much later, around 870 AD.
So a gap of several centuries between the church's founding and the first clear record of this specific miracle.
A significant gap, yes. The church has this long history, but the Holy Fire, as we sort of understand it now, doesn't seem to have those very early attestations.
But it did become a major tradition later on.
Absolutely. By the 11th century, it was well established. Crusaders wrote about it, rulers acknowledged it, huge crowds gathered. It became, a really central event for the Eastern Orthodox Church.
Has this ceremony itself changed over time?
It seems so. Some early descriptions suggest it might have been more public. Maybe the patriarch wasn't even inside the tomb when the fire appeared.
Oh.
But after a major historical event, the fall of Constantinople in 1453, things seemed to shift.
How so?
The ceremony became more private. The patriarch started going into the sealed tomb alone. The actual moment of the fire appearing happens, out of public view.
Any idea why that change happened? Political reasons? Theological?
It's a really good question. Historians suggest maybe increased instability made a more controlled setting necessary.
Yeah.
Or perhaps liturgical practices just evolved. It shows how traditions aren't always static.
Right. History impacts things.
Definitely. And there's another story connected to this. From the 1500s, Jerusalem was under Muslim rule then.
Yep.
And the story goes that Orthodox Christians were barred from entering the church for the ceremony one year, denied access to the tomb.
So no ceremony inside?
Not for them.
Yeah.
But according to the tradition, the fire appeared anyway.
Right.
On an outside column of the church. It supposedly burst forth from the stone.
From the stone itself?
Yes, and with such force, it's said to have cracked the column, and people point to a crack that's supposedly still visible today.
Wow. That's dramatic.
It really is.
So you have these powerful stories, this deep belief in a miracle.
A direct sign from God linked to the resurrection for many believers.
But then there are other explanations offered too, right? More natural ones?
Of course. Skeptics or researchers propose possibilities like, a hidden oil lamp or chemical reactions, things that could create fire without an obvious external source.
Right, the illusion explanation.
But what's also interesting is looking back historically, even rulers or writers who weren't Christian, they often acknowledged that something unusual seemed to happen there. They might not have called it a divine miracle, but they recognized the event's power or peculiarity.
So it wasn't just believers noting something strange.
That adds another dimension, I think. This acknowledgement from different perspectives over the centuries.
Okay, so summing up the key questions around the holy fire. We've got the timing issue. The first detailed records appearing quite late.
Centuries after the church was built, yes.
Then the change in the ceremony itself, from maybe more public to private.
Yeah, why did that happen?
And I suppose the big one is, if this specific fire event wasn't recorded right from the beginning, right after the resurrection, what does that mean for how people understand it today?
Exactly. These are the tough questions you grapple with when looking at the history and theology of it.
Okay, now let's shift gears quite dramatically.
Yes, to a very different kind of depiction.
We're moving from this annual physical manifestation.
To a specific interpretation of prophecy about a future event.
And it's a powerful image.
Yeah.
Based on Revelation 19.11, I believe.
That's the one. It presents a view of Jesus' return that is, well, quite startling for some, maybe even terrifying, as you said earlier.
Describe that imagery for us.
Okay, so the text says the heavens open, and there's Jesus on a white horse.
A white horse.
Yes. And he's called faithful and true, his purpose, to judge and make war, but in righteousness.
Judging and making war. That definitely contrasts with the gentle shepherd image.
Very much so. And this is often tied into broader end times prophecies.
Like the resurrection of witnesses, final judgments, the Antichrist figure, Armageddon, that whole complex.
Precisely. It paints a picture not just of a savior, but of a returning king, a warrior, a judge.
Let's unpack the symbolism there, the white horse.
Traditionally, in that context, a white horse often signifies a warrior, a conqueror, someone going into battle or returning victorious.
Okay, and the names faithful and true.
They emphasize his absolute reliability, his authority, his right to judge.
What about his appearance? Eyes like fire.
Yes, eyes like blazing fire. It suggests perhaps omniscience, seeing everything, and maybe righteous anger or judgment.
And multiple crowns.
Many crowns, yes, signifying ultimate sovereignty over all rulers, all kingdoms.
There's also something about a name only he knows.
Right. A name written that no one knows but he himself. It might hint at a deeper, perhaps not yet fully understood, aspect of his nature or authority, something revealed at that time.
And the robe, stained with blood. What's the interpretation there?
That's debated a bit. Some see it pointing back to his own sacrifice on the cross. Others see it as anticipating the blood of his enemies in the coming judgment or battle.
So it connects to both sacrifice and conflict.
Potentially, yes. And he's not depicted as returning alone.
No.
The text mentions armies in heaven following him, also on white horses, often interpreted as angelic forces.
And his weapons. Not typical swords, right?
No. A sharp sword is described as coming out of his mouth.
Out of his mouth.
Yes, symbolizing the power of his word, that his commands, his judgments have the force of a weapon. And he carries an iron scepter, or rod.
Representing.
Authority, absolute rule, the power to crush opposition.
And then the ultimate title is given.
King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It leaves no doubt about the claim. Supreme authority over absolutely everything and everyone.
It makes you think back. You mentioned rulers. Think about Palm Sunday.
Ah, yes. A very different entry into Jerusalem.
The crowds then, many of them, were hoping for a conquering Messiah, weren't they? Someone to overthrow Roman rule.
They were. They expected a political, military liberator then.
But the understanding later was that they misunderstood the timing, that there were two comings planned.
That's the theological framework, yes. A first coming in humility, riding on a donkey.
A symbol of peace.
Exactly, to offer salvation, to suffer. And then a future second coming in power and glory.
On the war horse.
On the war horse, yes. To judge, to reign. The contrast is stark.
And the idea is that you need to understand both aspects, the savior and the judge, to grasp the full picture.
That's certainly how it's presented in this interpretation. Both are seen as essential facets of his identity and mission.
So we've covered quite a bit of ground here.
We have, from this yearly, localized physical claim in Jerusalem
The Holy Fire, with all its history and questions.
to this sweeping, cosmic, powerful vision of a future return described in Revelation.
Two very different manifestations or expected manifestations.
Absolutely. One happening now, year after year, grounded in a specific place and tradition. The other, a prophesied future event with global, even cosmic implications.
It really brings up some big questions for you, the listener. What do you make of these two accounts?
How do things like historical traditions like the Holy Fire shape belief compared to interpretations of future prophecies?
And what does it mean if a sign, like the fire, doesn't seem to have clear, unbroken documentation right back to the very beginning? Does that change its significance for you?
And how do you reconcile these images? The peace symbolized by the donkey and the power and judgment symbolized by the war horse. Can they coexist in one figure?
These aren't easy questions, are they?
Not at all. They invite a lot of personal reflection, maybe further reading and thinking on your own.
We hope this deep dive has, sparked some thoughts for you.
Giving you something to chew on.
So that final thought to leave you with, is that annual flame in Jerusalem perhaps a kind of lingering echo, a quiet reminder?
Or could it be viewed differently, maybe even as some kind of subtle precursor, pointing towards that dramatically different future event described in Revelation?
What does exploring both of these ideas together mean for your own understanding of faith, of history, of what might be possible?
Lots to think about.